All right. Welcome to the Viking Age podcast, the official podcast for the vikingage.com. I'm your host, Adam Patrick. I'm the editor and lead writer of the vikingage.com. I'm here joined as always by my co-host, Chris Schad, who writes for us here at the Viking Age, as well as some other publications, Zone Coverage, and Bring Me the News. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to this video if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe to this channel, like this video. And if you have already done those things, we greatly appreciate you. We just crossed the 300 subscriber threshold on YouTube, so that's been pretty fun. We just started this channel up a few months ago, so that's pretty exciting for us. So thank you for those who have subscribed and sticking with us here. So make sure you also like the Viking Age on Twitter and Facebook. And Chris, I got no trivia or anything for you today to start off. So let's just get right into it. But I guess before, just a simple, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Nothing really too exciting since Monday. Kirk Cousins went up at the podium and acted like the robot he is, and yeah, here we are. I mean, I have nothing to share. I bought a PS5 today. I mean, if you
Oh,
really, yeah,
that's
I
pretty.
know,
That's
right?
pretty
I
exciting.
I won the battle. I won the battle. Apparently, I beat the
There you go.
bots,
There
so
you go.
I could claim victory there. But I'll probably put it down and play NCAA 14 anyway once I get it. But
It's pretty exciting. Yeah, Kirk Cousins, who I think he was asked about what the differences were in like this year's offense and the previous regime, and he was like, not a whole lot. And then everyone's just like, what? Like what? What are you talking about, man? So
I
yeah,
wonder I wonder what Zimmer has on him. Like I'm not saying like there's
I don't
some
know, man.
dirty dark secret or anything, but I think there's something is up because nobody is saying anything and nobody would say anything last year. It made sense last year because Mike Zimmer was their coach, and if they did say anything, they could get cut, they could get benched, they could get whatever. Now that Zimmer is gone, everybody's like, we don't want to talk about it, which is good because
Yeah,
I guess taking the high road is a good thing. Now, probably not good for us who want contents and all that stuff, but yeah.
I mean that stuff comes out eventually, so we don't have to. And
Zimmer's gonna have an interview
oh
eventually.
yeah,
It's
for
gonna
sure.
happen.
Or write a
Yes.
book, or he can write a book for
Mm-hmm.
sure. The amount of things that happened when he was there. All right. Today's show, we're gonna start off. Some more power rankings came out. I think a few episodes ago we talked about how ESPN had their power rankings for after the draft and free agency, and they weren't too optimistic about the Vikings. Had them at number 23. Well, some more power rankings have come out recently from PFF and NBC Sports Peter King, and they feel kind of similar to ESPN. So Peter King has in his latest power rankings the Vikings at number 19, so outside of the playoffs. And then PFF's Sam Monson also has the Vikings outside of the playoffs, but he has them even lower, more closer to ESPN, and he has them at number 22 in his most recent power rankings. So, my question for you, Chris, to start this off is, are the Vikings too high or too low in these power rankings? And does like more of them coming out and having a similar ranking, does it make you feel differently maybe about the Vikings' chances next year?
I would say high end, they're probably 16th, 17th. I mean, this is a mediocre team. And much like our quarterback rankings last week that we did, I think a lot of teams that are in the middle there are kind of 16A, 16B, 16C. Like you could make a case for about 8 or 9 teams to be in that mediocre jumble in the middle of the pack. And the Vikings are one of those teams. It is a little weird because Peter King did say that he thinks that the Vikings can make a surprise run in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But I think too, the other approach that these guys are taking is they need to see it because, like we mentioned before, they are running this thing back from a team that has been under 500 to, I don't know if it's 900 days yet, but it's certainly been 800, probably closer to 900 than 800, but 800, 900 days. So, I mean, it's hard to get excited about this team. We could be optimistic. Looking at Kevin O'Connell, looking at all the stuff they're doing offensively, the new defense and everything else. But I think that this is still a team that has been largely mediocre since its run in 2017. And until they do something to prove it, you're going to see a lot of rankings in the 20s or even late teens because we just don't know, especially with Kevin O'Connell.
Yeah, they haven't done a lot in the offseason aside from getting a new head coach and a new GM, and they decided to bring pretty much everyone back and run it back, I guess, and be super competitive, quote unquote, from the owners. And I think was it Bill Barnwell who came out with like the worst off seasons in the NFL. I think it was today, and he had the
Mm-hmm.
Vikings included. They didn't have the worst off season, but they were among the teams that he picked. And I think it's just because they didn't make a lot of
They
changes
were
when they needed to.
they were 17th, which is quite fitting for this team. 16, 17, somewhere in there. Like
Yeah,
this whole team, to quote MJF, is mid.
yeah.
Everything is in the middle. It's mediocre. Even if some people want to jack up Kirk Cousins, it's still a mediocre team until they stop being a mediocre team, until they make a run, until they win some games that they're not supposed to win and kind of make us go, oh, maybe this team's for real. And we're not going to know that until the season starts. So, I mean, I have no problem with these rankings. I mean, some people will be offended, and that's fine. But until they prove it to me, I would put them in about the same category.
Yeah, I think it's more of like maybe an awakening or like a come back down to earth because I think if you've been watching, Vikings content this offseason, listening to interviews and watching their highlight videos, you're like, oh, getting all optimistic and jacked up about this team for next season. But every team's doing that right now.
Mm-hmm.
And every team's fan base, maybe not the Jaguars, maybe even the Jaguars, because they got rid of Urban Meyer, are thinking, like their team can make the playoffs next season. Maybe not the Texans. Probably not the Texans. Um, so I think these rankings were more of like, okay, these guys are more of a national they cover the national spectrum more than just the Vikings and they look at it more broadly. So them placing the Vikings where they place them is kind of like, oh, okay, so this team still has a bunch of work to do and I think that's pretty fair. But what happens to the Vikings next season, 2023, if they finish, as the 23rd or 22nd best team in the NFL.
They blow it up.
Yeah.
They blow up this roster. I mean, Quasey had his finger over the button this offseason. He thought about it, but he's like, nah, I'm gonna wait. And you know, at first it's kind of a decision where you're just like, why don't you blow it up? This team hasn't done anything over the past 2 years. But when you think about it, it's all about the cap game. Because right now, if they cut a whole bunch of people going into this season, they would have so much dead money on the books that they wouldn't be able to do anything. They can't manipulate it. They can't do anything with it. So why not bring those players back? And why not try it for one more year and see if the coach was the problem? See if Kevin O'Connell can squeeze a couple more wins out of this team. By waiting next year, you can get out from Dalvin Cook. You could get out. You could have gotten out from Adam Thielen, but you extended him. You know, a lot of these players have lower cap hits where if this isn't working, then you hit the reset button, you start. The only problem, and Bill Barnwell mentioned this in the article you were talking about, was that you could look at this a couple years down the road and be like, man, if we had started over 1 year earlier, we would be in a much better spot. Because think about it. If you make trades this offseason, you know, I mean, even the trade from pick 12 to 32, get Detroit's second rounder, which is probably going to be what, first 5 picks of the second round. I know a lot of people are kind of feeling Detroit a little bit, but I mean, it's likely it's going to be a very early second round pick or find a way to get a first round pick. You weren't going to get first and second rounders for a lot of players on there. This isn't Madden, but I mean, stockpiling picks for the 2023 draft, which figures to be deeper than this current draft, especially at the quarterback position, could prove to be costly. So, I mean, I think if this team falls flat on its face, we're going to see some major changes to the roster because we know Quasey and Kevin O'Connell aren't losing their jobs after year one. It's going to be on the players.
Yeah. You brought up, they weren't going to get first round picks. How many players on the Vikings roster do you think they can get first round picks for? Like what? Justin Jefferson, Brian O'Neill.
Yeah, NFL
Uh,
trades are so weird.
yeah.
Like it's hard to predict. Like
I don't think they're going to get a first round pick for Danielle Hunter this summer if they traded him. I
no,
don't
not
know.
with that
If it was
injury history.
maybe a late first round, like a contender, they'd be willing to give up a late first round for Danielle Hunter, but
What
not a
did the Bears
not a
give
top
for
10 pick.
Daniil or not Daniil Mack, Khalil Mack? Like
I
they
think they
only
gave up a
got like
second
second
rounder.
rounders,
I think so, yeah.
right? Which
And he's
is
older.
fine. I mean,
Yeah, he's
yeah,
older.
he's a little older than Daniil is, but I mean, yeah. I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, Kwesi, I think, kind of alluded to it. He's like, we only have the offers that we have. If they're getting lowballed for like, we'll give you a sixth rounder for Dalvin Cook, it's like, we'll just keep them and run them into the ground. Like, we'll try and compete with these guys. That's not a problem. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I'm
because
curious. Yeah, go ahead.
well, Matthew Collar mentioned this too. Like the Robert Woods trade, the Rams traded Robert Woods to the Titans, and I think they
Mhm.
got a seventh round pick for him. If Kwesi did that with Adam Thielen, oh my God, this state would not just because of the whole he's from Minnesota thing, just because as much as I rag on him, Adam Thielen's a really good football player. And if Kwesi comes in and like, well, that was the deal we got, and I decided I was going to trade Adam Thielen, we would have ran him out of town. So I mean, that has
I think
something to do with it too.
wasn't Robert Woods coming off didn't he tear his ACL last
He
year? I
did.
feel like yeah,
Yep.
so I'm sure that played a part. And I would say Adam Thielen's been a better receiver than Robert Woods in his career. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe a little biased. But yeah, I think if they finish 22nd or 23rd in the NFL next year, I think you do have to get rid of you got to start getting rid of people like even Danielle Hunters. Like I'm pretty sure it's going to be very difficult to get rid of Kirk Cousins unless he approves a trade somewhere else. But you got to start, Harrison Smith, Neil Hunter, Eric Kendricks, and Adam Thielen, Dalvin Cook. Like you got to just start, you know, let Irv Smith go somewhere else. If you have to move on from maybe Brian O'Neill. Like just get all the assets you can to build a better team for the future that can sustain success and not one that's just like, oh, we had a good year this year every 5 years. We had a good okay year this year every 3 years. Like that's kind of how the Vikings franchise feels like it's been for the last 2 decades. It's just like a pretty good season here, a really good season here. Okay, we're in the hunt. But you look back at Denny Green's tenure in the '90s. They were they were pretty consistent. They made the playoffs every year. They didn't do a whole lot in the playoffs, but they made the playoffs. I think 8 out of his 10 seasons. Uh, so I think that's more of a place where the Vikings want to be is just that consistency. Obviously, they want to do better than that. They want to actually win in the playoffs. But that kind of sustained success is probably what they're shooting for, and they might have to do that. Might have to take a few steps backward if they want to move forward. All right, next topic. So the Vikings could have a bit of a punt returning problem. Yes, this is it's May 26th, so we're talking about the punt returning situation here in the Vikings offseason because we are scraping from the very bottom of the bowl. All right, so Vikings special teams coordinator Matt Daniels spoke with the media the other day, and he was asked about the team's punt return situation, and he revealed that 4 players have been taking punt return reps in OTAs this spring. They are KJ Osborne, Amir Smith Marset, rookie Jalen Naylor, and rookie Thomas Hennigan. And then he went on to describe their performance as quote unquote rusty, which is not really a gleaming review, if you're going to use that word. So, 2 seasons ago, the Vikings were historically bad at returning punts. And I think it definitely had an effect on their ability to have success that season. So Chris, could the punt return job be an underrated problem for the Vikings next season?
Yeah, they haven't had success there since former John or fellow John Marshall Rocket Marcus Sherrills retired a
Oh,
couple
well, there you
years
go.
ago. Um, yeah, I mean, it's a big one when you think about field position. I mean, the 2020 Vikings had a long way to go almost with every possession they had. D.D. Westbrook was a little better last year, but he also had his moments. So I don't know. Is that a guy that maybe you go into free agency in this final wave and find a punt returner or a guy that's had experience doing it?
Yeah.
I don't think I want KJ Osborne doing it just
No.
because that was a disaster a couple years ago. But that's what OTAs are for. You
Mhm.
go out and you find guys, you try and use them in different positions, and you decide whether you want to use them or whether you don't want to use them. Remember, Anthony Barr almost on a yearly basis decided to put him at edge, and they never did again. Why? Because they saw something they didn't like. So I'm not sure what the answer is. We're just going to have to find out as these OTAs continue, as they go into mini camp, maybe even to training camp, and see who is available. And you could also, sometimes from camp cuts, you could
Yeah.
find a punt returner that way. Um, it's really going to be interesting. I will say that Matt Daniels was really impressive up at the mic. I
Oh
thought
yeah.
that he was very prepared.
Yeah.
He had a lot of energy that we're just not used to in these press conferences. He said that he loves rookies, which is hilarious considering what the old regime thought of
Mhm.
rookies.
Mhm.
It's just another reason to like this coaching staff. I mean, I will say the one thing about the coaching staff is that they're likable. That doesn't mean jack once they start playing games. But I mean, I like the fact that they all seem to have a plan. They all seem to know what they want to do. They're willing to explain their actions, which I don't
Yeah.
think the past regime was willing to do. Um, I think that Matt Daniels, even if they're rusty right now, he'll find a way to fix it, whether it's internally or externally. So it could be a problem, but I'm not sure when it will be extinguished, but I'm sure it will be fixed.
Yeah, I think it's good that they're finding this stuff out now. Like you mentioned, it is OTAs. They're gonna have mini camp. It's a perfect time to find this out because you do have that, few months before the season. You can sign, free agents that are out there. I think Tavon Austin is a free agent right now. That could be maybe someone you bring in because he's had experience as a punt returner. He's getting pretty old though. I think he's like 32.
Yeah.
Old. I'm older than that, so never mind. Um, but yeah, like that's kind of why I like football because you'd think like you've solved a bunch of problems like with your offense. You could solve your problem with your offensive line. You could solve your cornerback secondary problem. But then like there's these tiny little problems that could like come to bite you back in the butt. And the punt returner could be one where your team's playing well and they're beating a really good opponent, and then you muff a kick or you muff a punt, and or you're playing a really bad team and you muff a punt, and then they get momentum and they beat you and knock you out of the playoffs or something like that. So like it's an important role. I would not like to see KJ Osborne do it. One, because he was terrible when he had the role in 2020, and two, I think he's gonna be the number 3 receiver, and I think his importance is gonna be a lot more. It's a lot bigger on the offensive side of the ball than as a special teams player. Amir Smith Marset, I think, is interesting because he does have the kick return skills, and I think Matt Daniels mentioned that he has the skill set that you like to see in a punt returner. Jalen Naylor, he's speedy. He's a late round rookie, so if he wants to make the team, this might be one of his shots. And then Thomas Hennigan, undrafted guy out of Appalachian State. He actually has like the most punt return experience out of all these guys, aside from KJ Osborne. But he ran, I believe, a 4.740. So not really thinking he's going to be a front runner for this. You never know. Um, but you mentioned this guy. Well, maybe this isn't your choice, but you mentioned Marcus Sherrills earlier. But who is the best punt returner in Vikings history? Looking back, do you think it's Mr. Sherrills or do you have someone else in mind?
Well, statistically, it is. I think he leads the franchise in punt return yards or average or something like that. Trying to think of other punt returners because it's been a while since the
Yeah.
Vikings have had a good one outside of Cheryl's. David Palmer, I remember as a kid, was very good as a punt returner. He was a
Yep.
guy that was kind of before his time, where he was a bit of he was kind of a passing down back. But I mean, back in the 90s, it was kind of run the ball. We got a workhorse. We got Robert Smith. Why would we want to hand it to David Palmer? Mewelde Moore did it for a while. I don't think he was great, but I know that he did it. Yeah, as far as punt returners, I can't really think of too many. Can you?
Yeah, I don't know. It's Cheryl's. He's definitely the best.
No,
Definitely
well, you asked me for other ones too. I mean, I
No, I
wanted to
didn't know if
throw
you.
in other names out there, but I mean,
Yeah, I didn't know
yeah,
if
it
you had
is
anyone in
Marcus
mind.
Sherrills.
Yeah,
Yeah,
easily. He has most touchdowns, most yards, most returns. Yeah,
go Rockets.
easily. He's
Yeah.
he's very efficient. Like people are like, he's not that flashy, but you could rely on him to just not make a mistake. Except for the divisional round against the Niners, and then it was time to go. But here, I compiled a list of some former, notable players who have returned at least one punt in their time with the Vikings, which is this is deep in the offseason content right here. So we got Randy Moss. I
Yeah,
think you
he
can
had the
find a
big one against Kansas
Chiefs.
City
Yeah.
last Sunday Night Football. Yeah, I remember
Uh,
that.
Stephon Diggs, he returned some punts.
Okay. Yeah.
Robert Smith, back in the day, returned some punts. Adam
Okay.
Thielen. Adam Thielen during the early days
Yeah.
of Adam Thielen, he did that. Nate Burleson.
Mhm.
Anthony Carter, going way back here.
Yeah.
And Cordell Patterson gave it a one shot, and that's about it. But now I have another question for you. So Cheryl's holds the all-time Vikings record for 5 punt return touchdowns. Do you know which two players are tied for second?
All right. Was it Moss?
No.
Okay. I didn't know if he had returned many, but
Nope. He has one. He
was
has
it?
one.
All right, I'll go with David Palmer.
He's one of them. You know the other one?
Okay. Okay. Anthony Carter.
No. You already mentioned the other guy too, Mewelde Moore.
Oh, okay.
Moore and David Palmer have 2 career punt return touchdowns for the Vikings, so they are second.
Well, see, when you asked me about Cheryl's, at least I named like the 2
You
other
did.
good punt
You did.
returners.
You
So, I
did.
mean, I have that. I know some of my fellow JM alums are being like, "What are you doing?" And yeah, I know. I wanted to put other names out there. Okay. I worked at a high school newspaper for a while, and they're like, name everybody on the team. So
Yeah.
that's what I was doing.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Mewelde Moore and David Palmer and Marcus Sherrills, they're on the pedestal of Vikings punt returners. But just looking at that stuff, it just makes me realize like how many of like some of the best receivers in Vikings history have returned punts. Like you look at Stephon Diggs and Thielen and Moss, and it's like, I thought Adrian Peterson did one, but I think he was just a kick returner. For whatever reason, they only trusted him with kick returns. Because I remember he had, as a rookie, he was doing kick returns. Because I think he
The
returned one.
Chicago game. He
Yes.
ran one back, didn't he?
There you go.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, we'll move on to our final topic, which has to do with kind of just looking back at the offseason. So, the offseason's almost over for the Vikings and the rest of the league. So it seems like a good time to just look back and reflect on some of the things that they did and didn't do. So, pretty simply, looking back at the last few months, Chris, what has been the most exciting move or decision, in your opinion, that the Vikings have made?
I had to think about this, not because I'm being negative, but this offseason was like getting socks for Christmas. Yeah, I mean, you're disappointed when you get them, but I mean, the older you get, you're like, I didn't want to buy socks anyway. This is awesome. So I think a lot of the moves were just kind of like, eh. So I would say the one that wins by default is Zadarius Smith signing with the Vikings. He's a name. He's had a lot of success with the Packers, especially
Mhm.
against the Vikings.
Mhm.
Viking fans always get excited when they sign former Packers. They're like, yeah, they get to play him twice a year. Yeah. And I don't know. His back might not hold up, but I mean, that was probably the most exciting move because not only is he going to be a force on the field if he's healthy, he's going to be a positive influence in the locker room. He's already rubbing off on Danielle Hunter. He's all over those team produced clips where he's there and everybody's like, yeah, let's go. Yeah, yeah. And he's like, yeah, Minnesota, baby. We gonna play Green Bay week 1, you know. So as far as like absolute exciting move, that's probably it. And like it moved the needle. It was exciting. It's more exciting than not exciting, but I mean, there wasn't much competition.
Yeah, I think just speaking on Zadarius Smith, I think he's probably got a career in TV or whatever if he wants to. He's just
Mhm.
got that outgoing personality where just everyone just no matter what he's talking about, you want to listen to him because he's going to make it sound interesting. So if that's a future that he wants to have, then I think he would do well in it. I would pick sticking. I guess I'll take the negative. I don't even think it's negative because we're talking about like the most exciting, best moves or whatever they made this offseason. And I think it was moving on from Rick Spielman. He was there for a long time. He had a lot of chances to turn things around. It's just getting stale, and they're running into a lot of the same problems. His recent draft classes were just not good, even though he's getting like 15 players at a time. There was like one or two that were turning out to be even helpful at all. Um, and the move to move on from it, I don't think it was expected. I think a lot of people, most people expected Mike Zimmer to be fired. I don't think too many people expected Rick Spielman to be let go, but I think it shows that, it was nice to see Vikings ownership kind of, put their foot down and make a big change for the front office. Now that was really like the one of the only changes they made. They were willing to make to the team this year, but I think it's significant, and I think they got a really good GM in Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, who seems to is very forward thinking. He's really really optimistic and positive. He's going to do things a lot differently. I feel like than the previous regime. So I think it was a good move that needed to be made. Things were they're just starting to get stale. And it was time to move on. And now Rick is thriving on TikTok. So everyone got the best out of it. You have any thoughts on that?
Yes, but it also coincides with what you're about to ask me next.
Okay,
But
okay, okay.
yeah, go ahead and we can move
All right,
on and
then.
I'll give you my
Yeah.
thoughts.
On the flip side, what has been the most disappointing move of the Vikings offseason?
It's that they're running this thing back. And it's not because I don't think it's going to work, because I think the Vikings could be a 10 win or maybe even 11 win team under
Mhm.
Kevin O'Connell. It's that, part of the problem towards the end of the year, I think, was the players and some of the players in the locker room. The Minnesota Wild is something that a lot of people compared the Vikings to, me, myself included, as they got to the end of the season. And I know that they didn't have the playoff success that many of us had hoped for with them, but it's a very similar situation. There are some players that seem to be a negative influence around the building. And right now, everything seems fine. It's almost like when the substitute teacher walks in and you kind of, sit up a little straighter and you might try and see what you can get away with. I think that's the process that's happening right now. And if, like we said in the open, if this team loses, a lot of those players are going to be sent packing. Now, I don't know who is a negative influence in the locker room, but I mean, I'll borrow a line from Judd Zolgad. This team wasn't likable last year. Like, there weren't a lot of players that you could really get behind and be like, all right, every Sunday. I love the jersey. I love the team that I'm cheering for. But a lot of the players were just kind of like Kirk Cousins. In some ways, Dalvin Cook, he had the
Mhm,
off-field incident.
mhm, mhm,
Um, as players had to sit out games because they weren't vaccinated. That was kind of a PR thing too. There were a lot of things that kind of rub people that mind. Brashad Breeland, the ultimate heel in terms of the Vikings. Like, yeah, just bringing a lot of these guys back, you're just like, okay, was it the players or the coach? And that's going to be the theme of this year. So, I mean, when Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell came in, you thought, hey, we're going to play Madden. We're going to sweep everybody out and start something new. They keep everybody. It could work. It could lend its way to a better season this year. But I think it was just really disappointing in the end. And like I said, it was like getting socks for Christmas. It might be good in the long run, but it's not real exciting.
That's a very good metaphor for their off season. It's just it really was because they made these big changes, and every year you get excited for Christmas. You're like, what am I gonna get? Like it's gonna be like a new video game system or whatever,
It's going
and
to be a PS5. Yeah. No.
yeah, and it's like it's as big as a PS5, so it might be, but it's like no, it's just a huge package of socks, which is kind of what happened to the like they're brand new, you know, you know, they're the more modern socks, but just not really what you're looking for at this point. I would
My
go.
parents would wrap
Okay, go.
I'm just yeah, just throwing this out there. My parents would actually wrap like gifts inside of larger boxes that weren't the
Yeah,
actual
yeah, yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's pretty
Huh,
much what it is. It's like, "Oh, this could be something big." Oh,
it's a
it's
pencil.
just a restructure for Harrison Smith. Okay.
Yeah, that's not cool. I'm not gonna do that to my kids. If if it's a big present, it's gonna be a big present. Um, my most disappointing moment or move or non-move for the Vikings this offseason was the decision to not hire Jim Harbaugh. Um, this isn't a knock on Kevin O'Connell. He seems like a great
Mhm.
guy, and he could end up being a very good coach for the Vikings. But I think based on what we know about how the Vikings essentially brought everyone back from the 2021 roster, at least most of the main guys, Kirk Cousins, Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen, Harrison Smith, Eric Kendricks, like Daniel Hunter, brought all these guys back, and how they continue to say they want to be, super competitive and compete in the playoffs and everything. Like Jim Harbaugh feels like he would have been the better option to get the Vikings over the hump and potentially into a Super Bowl. I could be wrong, but I don't think Kevin O'Connell right now is going to come in and transform the Vikings from what they were last year into, a 13-win team competing for the number one spot in the NFC. Could be wrong. Let me just say that again. Could be wrong. Um, but if Harbaugh was the coach, I think they might have been able to do that next season just based on what he was able to do in his short stint with the Niners. You know, at in most of his college stints, he's been able to transform his teams rather quickly as well. So I just think based on what their ownership wants this team to keep doing, I think Harbaugh would have been the better option. And we don't know, if he was asking for a bunch of money or what he wanted to do with the team. We don't know why didn't work out. But I think like when you put Harbaugh and Kevin O'Connell side by side, and you're like, we want to compete for a championship relatively quickly, I think a lot of people would pick Harbaugh. Um, do you feel similarly or differently?
I think a lot of people wanted Harbaugh. Like
Yeah.
Twitter was just ablaze when everybody thought he was going to be hired as the head coach of the Vikings. Like everybody was refreshing, and then all of a sudden it didn't happen, and we're just like, oh, Kevin O'Connell. And I don't think O'Connell's going to be a complete dumpster fire. I mean, I would be shocked if this thing just goes
Yeah.
like multiple 3-win seasons or whatever. Like I would be floored. But you make a good point in that, knowing what we know now and the direction they went in with this roster, like Jim Harbaugh was never going to come in to take over some rebuilding project. It was going to be, hey, let's win a Super Bowl. That's what I'm here for. And they basically executed the perfect plan for if they did hire Harbaugh, extending everybody, playing financial gymnastics to keep all the players, running it back, like that would have been what it would have been under Jim Harbaugh, and people would have been more excited. Why?
Hmm.
Because you have Jim Harbaugh, you have a proven coach, you have a coach that's been to the Super Bowl. Like you've speculated before, it's kind of fun to wonder what happened in that building. Was he insane? Did he, rip his shirt off? Did he say, "Hey, let's go work out Colin Kaepernick," which is something else that could have happened.
Yeah.
Um, lots of things could have happened in that building. And yeah, I'd agree with you. It's still a little bit disappointing, but I think they're in good hands with Kevin O'Connell. I just don't know if we're going to see the immediate boost that we would have had with Jim Harbaugh, because I think, if we want to say, hey, the Vikings want 11 or 12 wins, might be the guy to do it.
Yeah, well, I think when they picked Kevin O'Connell, I think people just assumed, that was a sign that they were gonna be more in a rebuilding mode, kinda cut ties with a bunch of their guys, and they didn't do that. They kinda did something that people probably felt they were gonna do if they hired Harbaugh. So I think that's kinda what's maybe gotten people maybe less enthusiastic about, like, their approach, where it's like, "Why did you hire the rookie head coach and the rookie GM to go with, the team that already didn't work? Like, why don't you have them bring in their own guys and try their own thing?" But I don't think that's entirely up to them, but we don't know that either. But yeah, I just think the what they want to do is compete, and I think Harbaugh would have given them a better chance to do that. And I could be totally wrong too. He could have come in and been Urban Meyer 2.0. I don't think so. Don't think he's as much of a jackass as Urban Meyer is. Um, but you know, we haven't seen in terms of college coaches coming to the NFL, we haven't seen too many good ones recently. I think, Cliff Kingsbury's been okay. Matt Rule's been a disaster. Urban Meyer was a disaster. But yeah, it's not been good. So that's I feel like that's more personally for me too. It's more personally disappointing than it might not be represent the whole fan base because it's just I wanted Harbaugh to be the head coach. I'm not gonna lie. It would have been exciting and I feel like they would have had a better chance to I don't think they would have been 23rd in the PFF rankings. I don't think they would have been, 19th in Peter King's rankings. They would have
He
been
would have been a content machine too.
yeah.
Like, as writers, we would have been jacked. Like, all right, his press conferences would just be must see, like,
Yeah.
YouTube watches. It's not
The
must see
Vikings
television
the
anymore, but
Vikings would have
yeah.
been on prime time, like, 5 times if Jim Harbaugh was a head coach, like, and they have 1, maybe 2 primetime games next year. They would have
Yeah.
been must see, but it's okay. And it's weird too because the Wilfs I feel like the Wilfs are the type of owners that like those splash moves. They went and got Brett Favre, they 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 kept Adrian Peterson around after he got in trouble, and they got what Justin Jefferson, and they signed Kirk Cousins, and you know they they've done all these things that they've made a bunch of trades. They traded for Randy Moss back in the day, and Jared Allen, and like all these big moves, and I think it was just or uncharacteristic, which makes it feels like someone else might have had a more input on that decision. I'm sure we'll never find that out either. But yeah, it was just probably the most interesting thing to happen in this not only this Vikings offseason, but like Vikings off seasons in a long, long time. Like we're gonna look back in like 10 years and be like, Jim Harbaugh was almost the head coach. It's like, oh yeah, 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 yeah. I remember that. It was this close, but
Yeah.
not anymore. Now he's back. He's back in Michigan, like where he always wanted to be. So just kidding, guys. Just wanted to see. Just want to have a little talk. I'm back though. It's where I wanted to be.
LOL.
Sure, buddy. We'll see where you are next year. Um. All right, that's what we got for today's show. A little shorter, but like I said, it's May 26th. There's not a whole lot to talk about unless you want to talk about the new practice squad rules that the NFL just passed. Pretty exciting stuff. But not really. So make sure you like this video, subscribe to this YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Facebook, follow Chris on Twitter. You can follow me if you want. I don't really care. But until next time, which will be next Thursday because Monday is a holiday. So spend time with your family. Don't watch this podcast. Spend time or just get some rest, I guess. But until next time, we will talk to you.